In an industry stuffed with marketing bullshit, empty promises, and shiny-suited liars, one woman's had enough. She knows what it's like to have the wrong clients, no money, and no time for fun. But she also knows how to fix it. And on the Business for Superheroes show, she promises to tell the down and dirty truth about business, sales, and running away with the circus. Here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
Hello and welcome to the Business for Superheroes show podcast. I'm Vicky Fraser and this is Joe.
Hello.
Happy New Year, guys, because we're actually recording this on New Year's Eve because that's how we roll with gin.
We have started the gin.
So Happy New Year. And, don't pay attention to any of that New Year, New You bollocks because, just make the change whenever. Anyway, I'll be talking about that in January. Well, it is January, but later in January. This week, we're going to be talking about why some stories are sticky.
What do you mean by sticky?
Sticky.
Sticky?
Okay, so probably easiest if I give you an example. Have you heard the latest ridiculous bollocks doing the round on Facebook? To wit, that if you copy and paste a status saying something, I don't know what, that Mark Zuckerberg will randomly give away billions of dollars to somebody random on Facebook.
There's always nonsense like that going around.
Exactly. And yeah, so apparently Facebook will search through all of the posts and give money away at midnight on some unspecified day because that seems like the kind of thing that Mark Zuckerberg would do. Or, anybody really.
Right.
Yeah. And it all began, basically, after Mark Zuckerberg announced that he'd be putting 99% of his shares into some kind of a special vehicle that would allow him to give his money away. He didn't say who he was going to give it away to or when or why.
So like a clown car with big cash cannons.
I like to think of the special vehicle as being like a clown car with big cash cannons or possibly a Pope-mobile.
Yeah.
So instead of sucking money into the Catholic Church, the Pope would be firing it out to the poor people. That seems unlikely as well.
It seems unlikely.
Anyway, Zuckerberg actually was going to be doing something, or he was going to be managing his financial affairs so that he could give money away, but there was no suggestion that he would ever be giving it away randomly to Facebook users, or that, or that there was any kind of a scheme that you could copy and paste the right words and share it, and somehow you would magically win a shitload of money. And it's really stupid, and kind of a second thought would tell you that it's really stupid, but stories like this persist, which is what I mean by sticky. They do the rounds. Have you ever heard the one about waking up in a bathtub freezing cold in a hotel?
Someone's fished out your kidney and sold it. Yeah, they've stolen your innards. Yeah,
so the kind of story goes. It's a good story as far as it goes, because it's kind of like, oh my god, that's really freaky, and you wake up really cold, and you've been passed out, and you've been in a hotel for work or something, and you got chatting to a pretty lady. And the next thing you know, you wake up freezing cold and your back hurts.
I have heard such a story.
Yeah. Funnily enough, it's never happened to anybody known on this planet or off this planet. But it's a really good story and it's sticky. And there was another one that, oh my god, this really wound me up recently because people I actually know on Facebook were sharing it and it just made me facepalm so hard that I bruised myself. Do you remember the so-called supermoon phenomenon, which in itself is annoying because it's just like the moon is like a millionth of a millimetre slightly bigger and brighter?
Yes.
And there was a thing where one night Mars was going to appear in the sky as large as the moon.
Right.
Which, you don't even need an awful lot of scientific knowledge to know that the entire fucking planet would be doomed were Mars to appear in the sky as large as the moon.
That would cause some problems.
It would cause some problems. Not least of which would be that something catastrophic had happened to shove either us or Mars off its orbital path. And the gravity, and it's just stupid. And, a second's critical thought would tell you that it's stupid. For all of those reasons, even without having any knowledge of science. Right?
Yes.
I'm not being, unfair here.
No, it's idiots.
Yeah, idiots. And yeah, some of the people on my Facebook, friends list were sharing this, like in all seriousness sharing it. Joe's making a frowny face at me right now that you can't see.
I am. I'm trying to work out who the idiots are.
Yeah, but anyway, so it's just fucking stupid. But the point is that stories like this stick, and otherwise smart people read it and share it. And I don't really know why, because the effort of expending a couple of moments critical thought must be too much for them, I guess, but it just does my head in. And, there's constantly unverified stories doing the rounds, and it used to, do you remember in the days of email when you get, like, chain emails?
Oh, God, my parents still send those.
Do they? Oh, bless them. Yeah, but your parents are quite old and, quite naive, but then it's now that the same stuff is going on with Facebook news feeds. Instead of your inbox being clogged up, it's Facebook news feeds by people who should know better.
Yes.
And if you're one of these people who shares unverified stories on Facebook, shame on you. Stop it. Stop it right now. Because it's not harmless. Because I've heard people say, oh, it's really harmless, it's just a bit of fun and, better safe than sorry and that kind of thing. But it's not harmless because it lowers the collective IQ of the planet. It does.
I have a sip of gin.
But it does, because it encourages woolly thinking and it discourages independent critical thought, and it's just lazy. It's really lazy. Anyway, that was my slight aside rant. But what I'm really interested in is why they get shared and why they stick and, why they spread so quickly. While at the same time, ideas that are actually worthy of attention tend to die sad, lonely deaths without anyone knowing about them.
Okay.
Because if you can design an idea in the same way that these sticky stories are designed, then you can make them spread like wildfire, and it's great for marketing. It's great for really good scientific ideas that people struggle to get out there, because that's one of the things that science tends to fail at, is making stories stick, because they're very much, we need to be factual and we need to be sure that it's correct, which is good and true, but they tend to miss out the human element of it then, which I think is a real shame.
Okay.
So I've got an example for you here, because all societies are facing this, eternal problem of how to make people be healthier, right? Mm-hmm. So how to live healthy lifestyles, and we've got this obesity epidemic and all the rest of it. But it's really difficult to get people to change their ways, and you could argue leave them all to it because of personal responsibility. But I'm not quite that heartless, because kids suffer, and kids suffer from their parents' ignorance, and I don't think that's fair. And also, if nobody's ever been taught this stuff, how are they going to change their ways? But it's really difficult because, getting people to change their lifestyles is tough. I mean, remember when you gave up smoking? Was that easy?
No, it was not.
No, it was not. It was not easy. And what made you change? I bet it wasn't the messages from the government saying smoking's bad for you, was it?
No, it wasn't.
So what was it?
All kinds of things. Getting hold of a bit of control in my life. Not wanting to... Well, work had just started putting up these little horrible bus shelters around site. I used to work in a big industrial site, acres and acres of the place. And I used to have a cigarette when I manfully strode from one place to another. You would have a cigarette and talk to people.
Yeah.
And then it became apparent that they were going to stop people smoking anywhere outside of the buildings where you shouldn't be smoking. And they were going to make you all huddle in the drizzle under a little smelly bus shelter. And I just really didn't want to be one of them. I didn't want to join the unhappy-looking people under a bus shelter.
Yeah.
So I stopped.
Cool. And that really has very little to do with the government health messages.
Yeah, very little.
Very little. Because nobody really believes that they're going to die of, lung cancer or heart disease. They don't, because it's like a hypothetical thing in the future. It's really...
So it happens to other people, doesn't it?
It does happen to other people, yeah. And that's, by the way, also why so many teenagers die of stupidity, because they're invincible. Anyway, in America, the land of popcorn, a few health groups a few years ago were trying to raise awareness of the fact that movie popcorn, which was prepared with coconut oil at the time apparently, contained massive amounts of saturated fat. It was basically a death carton. Now, what they did was tell people that a bag of popcorn contains 37 grams of saturated fat. But that doesn't, I don't know about you, but that doesn't mean anything to me. Do you know how much saturated fat is bad for you?
No.
No, nor do I really.
Nor do I know what 37 grams of it would look like.
No, nor me. So, it kind of sounds like quite a lot, but at the same time, it's like, well, you're out for a meal and a movie and whatever, and a bag of popcorn, and, what's the harm? And so they were telling people this. So they were putting out messages saying, there's 37 grams of saturated fat. And that's just an empty, meaningless stat. It doesn't really mean anything. And they were sort of saying it's really bad for you, be healthier, choose healthier snacks. But it didn't work because it's boring. And people couldn't relate it to themselves or their lives. So what they did instead, and this is quite cool, it's very simple, was say, and this is the exact words that they used, a medium-sized butter popcorn at a typical neighbourhood movie theatre contains more artery-clogging fat than a bacon and eggs breakfast, a Big Mac and fries for lunch, and a steak dinner with all the trimmings combined. Now, you hear that and you just think, Christ, that's horrifying. One carton of popcorn contains all of that fat, and that's just, that's horrific, basically. What they've done is created an actual picture in your mind, because when I was reading that out, or when I read it for the first time anyway, because this is how my brain works, I could actually see a big greasy breakfast, a minging McDonald's lunch, and a big, chunky steak. And because that's how this kind of story works. It makes an image in your mind. It's the same with the kidney thief. You can see in your mind the person lying in a bath full of ice and, thinking, oh, what's going on here? Whereas just telling somebody that there's 37 grams of fat in something is just, there's no context for it.
Sure.
So they did that, and it was really, really successful. And, you can look this up for yourself, and you should do. Go and have a Google of,
Don't believe everything you hear on the internet, folks.
Don't believe everything you hear on the internet. But do look this story up, and you can find it, by the way, in Made to Stick, which is a really good book by Chip and Dan Heath, which I've read a couple of times because it's great.
Chip and Dan, that's an interesting name.
Chip and Dan, they're brothers.
Chip and Dan Heath.
Yes, Chip and Dan Heath. I shall enunciate better. But yeah, this popcorn story worked really well. And they actually, movie theatres stopped making popcorn with coconut oil because of it, because their sales were going down so much. I'm not going to give you any stats because I haven't got them, and you can go and do your own research, folks. But it works. So, what's the secret? What's the secret to getting people, what's the secret to telling stories that are sticky? First big secret is simplicity. It's as simple as that. Ba-bum.
Right, yeah.
Sorry. Simplicity. If you just boil stuff down, because we're always really tempted to explain stuff as thoroughly as possible. And, we want to, especially if it's quite a complicated idea, we tend to over-explain stuff. But too much detail doesn't work if you want a story to stick. So what you've got to try and do is cut it down to one simple statement, because anything more than one simple statement is going to be instantly forgotten, together with the key idea behind it. And it's not dumbing down, it's simplification, and there's a really important difference. So I remember hearing a story about engineers and people working on the shop floor, and the engineers were trying to...
Engineers are devastatingly good-looking people, by the way. Fine people.
Joe's an engineer. Anyway, the engineers had this idea for this. I can't even remember the details now, but it doesn't matter because I'm going for the key idea. The engineers had this idea and they wanted to implement it on the shop floor, and they explained it in great detail to the people working on the shop floor, who listened and then went and carried on as they had been doing in the past because they didn't understand it. Because it was over-explained massively. And it took somebody else to come in, have a look at what the engineers were trying to do, and then come in and distill it down to, okay, we want to do this and this is why. At which point the shop floor workers went, that makes sense. And everything changed. And it can be this kind of thing can be a real problem in science and technology fields, because you just end up with too much information and it just gets more and more complicated.
Just turns into a mush of our thoughts and ideas.
It does, yeah, and there's no way that you can understand that. So it's all about distilling the core idea into terms that anyone can understand without changing the meaning, basically. And that's actually a really tough thing to do. And it also sorts out the charlatans from the real experts, because real experts can make things simple. If you understand something really thoroughly, you should be able to make it very, very simple. You should be able to distill it down into the core details. And I think there's a really cool quote from Einstein somewhere that to the effect that, if you can make something simpler, then you understand it. But, if you don't, it takes an amateur to complicate stuff, basically, because they don't understand it well enough to explain it.
Okay.
And if you want to see how to do this really well, take a look at newspaper headlines, because newspaper headlines, the best newspaper headlines, are ideas distilled down into their very simplest form, because they have to grab your attention and they have to convey the meaning of an entire article in just a few words. And that's what makes a sticky idea. So a sticky idea must be simple, and then you can build your story around it.
Freddie Starr ate my hamster.
Freddie Starr ate my hamster, exactly. Which is, it's distilled the whole entire story down into 5 words.
Vicky was counting on her fingers there.
I was. Okay, so that's the first thing that a story must be to make it sticky. Simple. The second thing that a story must be is unexpected. because
Freddie Star ate my hamster.
Freddie Star ate my hamster, yeah, because that's, utterly bizarre. Because our brains run on autopilot most of the time, which is a good thing, because otherwise we'd never get anything done. We'd never get out of our driveways. And, if you thought about every move that you made in the morning, you'd be dithering in your bedroom for 2 hours, which some of us do anyway.
It does seem familiar.
Yeah. Which means that most of the information that we come across just passes us by unremembered. If you think about school, I don't know about your school days, but a lot of what I was taught in school I've just forgotten because it was boring. It wasn't boring. It was made boring by bad teachers and bad education systems. And I remember the one thing I remember about my history classes was my teacher being really dull. And he just used to parade facts and figures and names and numbers in front of us. And then one day he brought in, when we were studying World War I, he brought in Blackadder.
Right.
And we watched the Over the Top episode. And that's always stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And that's really cool. And, did you have any teachers that made stuff stick in your head that were really good at storytelling?
Ooh. Yeah, there was an English teacher who was like that. Mr. Lally. He was good.
Okay.
He was also frightening, but he was good.
We had a French teacher who used to throw the board rubber at us, and those big, chunky wooden board rubbers.
They've always got a really good aim as well. They get loads of practice teachers.
Yeah, geez, he was terrifying.
I had one teacher who had this was primary school. He had you remember Dunlop Green Flash shoes?
Yes.
So he had one of those on his desk with a smiley face on the toe end of it, and it was called Mr. Dunlop, and that was used expressly for just throwing and bouncing off people.
See, Mr. Dunlop is a sticky story. It's a sticky idea.
Yeah.
There you go. Anyway, unexpected. You have to surprise your brain into paying attention, basically. So, Freddie Star ate my hamster, or waking up in a bath full of ice with a backache because you've had your kidney removed. So, trick people or surprise people into paying attention. Don't trick people. Another example of this is boring safety talks on aeroplanes. If you fly often and, that you get the same boring message all the time, except for every now and then when you don't. Do you remember when we went to Iceland and was it Iceland?
Yeah, it was Iceland.
Yeah.
And they did a really nice video.
No, it wasn't a video. It was just didn't they say that one of the air hosts had been working for...
Oh, he was a stuntman in Hollywood.
He was a stuntman in Hollywood, and he was now working for Iceland Air because he'd fallen on hard times.
Yes.
And they peppered the safety demonstration with little anecdotes like that, which just it basically meant that everybody paid attention to the safety talk.
Pulled people's attention back to the stuff they had to get across.
Yes, because safety talks are boring when you've heard them all, and it is important that people listen, but they don't. So, surprise people, and they will pay attention, and not just pay attention, but they will remember what you're talking about. And related to this is curiosity gaps. People tend to believe they know all they need to know to get them through the day, and generally they do. So to get their attention, you need to show them that there's something important that they don't know yet, because curiosity is incredibly powerful. Tell the listeners why I'm so annoying when we watch films and TV shows, Joe.
Every time we watch something, there will be someone who you vaguely recognise, and... you'll be snuggled up, glass of wine, cat on your knee, everything's going nicely, watching a film, and you'll go, oh, I think I recognise, who's that fella there? And then 2 minutes later, you'll be on IMDb going through the whole filmography of whoever that person may or may not be. And 10 minutes later, you'll go, oh, right, yeah, he was in that episode of The West Wing where somebody did something, and that's it. And then you spend the next half an hour asking me what happened in the 10 minutes you missed because you were on IMDb working out who this person was. I'm
very sorry. I'm also not sorry because my brain is compelled to find things out. And this is true. Curiosity is really, really powerful. We are compelled to find something out if we don't know what it is. If our brain has a question, we have to answer it. And that is my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. I try not to look it up, but then it gets too much, and I have to. Anyway, so there you go. Great murder mystery books are, films, murder mystery films and things are really good because we can't resist finding out who done it, even if it's shit, even if it's a shit book or a shit film. We kind of still want to know who done it. And then we're angry because we've wasted, 2 hours of our lives or whatever. So create curiosity in your stories, and that will mean that people want to satisfy that curiosity. by listening and remembering and, finding out stuff. It's good.
Cool.
So the next reason why sticky ideas are sticky is that they have to be concrete and descriptive, not abstract and woolly and theoretical. So putting yourself into your readers' or listeners' shoes is a really good idea. How does what you say sound to somebody else? Are you just talking about random theoretical stuff, or are you telling a concrete story with actual people and things that have happened, even if you're making the things up? Try this game. In fact, let's try this. Okay, so what tune am I tapping out? Can you guess, Joe? Can you guess, listeners?
I don't know.
No. And the reason you did, but yeah, I was sitting there thinking, why can you not tell what that tune is? And the reason that you can't tell what that tune is because in my head, I'm playing the tune along with the tapping. It was Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot, by the way.
I know you said, well, that would have been my guess, actually. But I didn't want to guess.
But you can try this at home, get your friend or your partner or whatever to, tap out a tune like I just did on a table, and then get them to guess what the tune is, and you'll be there going, how can you not figure this out? It's obvious. But the only reason it's obvious is because you've got more information than they have.
Okay.
And that's the case with stories and with information that you want to impart to people as well. You've usually got much more information than the person that you're talking to, particularly when you're talking about your business and your specific specialism. People don't know as much about it as you do. If you talk about things in abstract concepts, then it's A, they're going to switch off, and B, they're not going to understand if they do listen, or that it's not going to stick anyway. Okay. But if you give concrete, understandable, specific examples and use, everyday language and use descriptive imagery, your stories will stick. And they'll be easier to understand, and there's, no jargon and no bullshit. And here's an example. The shopkeeper hasn't delivered outstanding customer service. They gave a customer a refund even though the shirt came from a different branch of the store. So one of them is like an abstract concept of outstanding customer service, and it's a bit jargony. And the other is, this is what the shopkeeper did.
Yeah.
Which is, self-evidently an example of great customer service. Okay. So, simple. And penultimately, sticky ideas must be credible. So those stories that I told you at the beginning, they're idiotic, but they actually required people to give a moment's thought to them. At first glance, to some people, they might well be credible, especially if they come from an original credible source. Or I say credible, I'm now making air quotes in the air. David Avocado Wolf is one fucking idiot example of what people consider a credible source, but he's not, he's an idiot.
Avocado Wolf?
Yeah, don't even go there. Okay. But the thing is, real credible ideas tend to be expressed in boring terms, and as I said, it's one of science's biggest failings, and I'm going to try and address that one day with, sticky stories.
Is that why people always preface their bullshit story with a friend of my friend, or my brother's cousin, or my mum's butcher? Yes. It makes it more credible.
Yeah, because it's people that you know, or people that you know. Or people that you've once met.
Allegedly exist.
Yeah, it's a kind of, it is. It's people trust stories told by real and trustworthy people, basically. So if you can say, my friend's dog walker was abducted by aliens, then, well, it doesn't make it any more credible, but to some people it might. It's craziness. So basically, to gain credibility, use experts. And I'm not talking just about doctors in white coats either. There's another good example of a woman who took part in a campaign to help people stop smoking. And she had lung cancer. She was in her 30s. She'd smoked since she was 10 years old, if you can imagine that. She was in her 30s and she was on her second lung transplant, and she looked like she was in her 60s. She was a wreck. And rather than get a doctor, a medical expert or a scientist in a white coat to deliver the message, they got this woman who had been smoking since she was 10 years old and was probably going to die soon, to deliver the message. And she was incredibly credible. She was credible because, she's not a doctor, but she's lived it. And that's much more credible even than the doctor, because
It's like first-hand experience of the thing.
Yeah, because like I said, you don't listen to a message that says this is bad for you, stop doing it. But you might well listen to a living example of why it's bad for you and what the consequences can be. So credibility is really important. You can use your audience as well to create their own credibility, if you like. So one of Ronald Reagan's electoral slogans was, ask yourself, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Which is a really clever thing to ask, because most people are going to say no, whether they were better off or not. Or yes, are you better off now? Anyway, whichever way around it's supposed to work. I've had gin.
I would say yes. Everybody typically is better off than they were 4 years ago. Unless you're in a big recession.
Yeah. And I don't know the background to his... Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is that he was asking his audience to use their own judgment and vote based on that, which is, people often trust their own judgment more than they do an expert's, especially if they're less self-aware, which, in my experience, most people are. Because if you're not aware of your own cognitive biases, then it's difficult to overcome them. So yeah, if you can ask your audience a question and get them to answer it themselves in your favour, without being manipulative and tricksy, because I'm not into that. But yeah, credibility is a thing. And finally, emotional triggers rather than dry facts. So going back to the woman with the lung transplant, that's totally emotional. There's facts as well, but that's totally emotional. And the popcorn thing was totally emotional as well, because it makes people go, oh my God, that's disgusting. So, facts are still important, and scientists love statistics, but that doesn't mean that you have to present them academically, and actually you need to humanise them. So emotional appeals inspire action, really. And it also helps people to think, what's in it for me?
Cool.
Yeah. You got to make people connect with your message and tell stories. Storytelling is a fabulous way to do that, which is a neat way for me to say next week's podcast is going to be all about storytelling.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Because I went on a storytelling course to Amsterdam with Sean D'Souza of Psychotactics, whose podcasts, by the way, are awesome. And the storytelling course was great. So I'm going to share a bit of that with you next week, I think. So just to sum up, you can remember the key to making sticky stories with the mnemonic success. I do like a good mnemonic.
Okay.
And success stands for simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and storytelling.
Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and storytelling.
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
All of those elements put into your idea or story will gain you a sticky idea. It's pretty cool stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. So make your story sticky, folks. And then, if you want to know more, you could always join my inner circle, which is businessforsuperheroes.com/inner circle, -circle.
Smooth.
Yeah, thanks. My inner circle members are superstars. Anyway, same time next week. I hope you've had a very splendid start to January.
Mm-hmm. When does this go out?
First week of January.
First week of Jan?
Yeah.
Well, I hope the hangover's gone away then.
Yeah, me too. Take care, folks.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Like what you've just heard? Tell your colleagues, tell your friends, send them to www.businessforsuperheroes.com/podcast.